Nothing like a nice cup of tea. Hi, I'm Spicy Steve. I'm down here at Merritt Kitchens in Kerrisdale to tell you a little about one of my favorite beverages, tea. Now you wonder what does it have to do with Spicy Steve, but tea originates in Asia. It's the world's oldest beverage, over 5,000 years old. And a lot of people, I find, don't really know a lot about tea from what they should. I grew up in an English household, so the cure to every problem was, let's put the kettle on and have a nice cup of tea. And that basically was the form of hospitality that my mom judged people by. Did they offer you at least a cup of tea when you were over? That's what she used to say. Anyway, tea is a custom and a beverage and drink in many countries of the world. The majority of tea, and the best tea, comes from India and from China. In India, you have Darjeeling teas up near the Himalayas that produce some fantastic teas. Then you have down the Assam teas, which are basically in northeast India. And you also have some teas down in the southern part, particularly on the island of Sri Lanka. There's some fantastic teas, which used to be called Ceylon. Over in China, you have many different parts of China, including the island of Taiwan, where different teas are grown. Now, teas start in the basic form. They're green. Then it goes through a process. It depends on the area of the world, the type of tea that's being created, that they'll start as a green leaf, and then they'll go through a fermenting, well, should we say a rolling, and picking has a lot to do with the tea. Then the fermenting and the drying process. So some areas of the world will have a pure green tea with a long flat leaf. Others will have a rolled. Then you'll have the fermenting process that goes on to create the blacker teas and the fermented teas like Oolong that you find in China. And so those will contribute to the different flavors. You also have a lot of other things that are added to teas, such as Russian caravan tea gets its distinct taste because apparently when they used to have the caravans going across from India back to Russia, the tea bags would rub up against the side of the camels and get all the sweat and smell of the camels. So you got this muskiness to Russian caravan tea. Doesn't sound that great, but would you believe people really liked it? But of course, if they hadn't tried anything else, that was the tea they grew up with in Russia. There's also other teas. In fact, the one I love to hate, one of the world's most popular teas, at least in North America, is Earl Grey. There's a big battle on who has the original recipe because of Earl Grey. Twinings is one that claims it, and I think one of the other big tea manufacturers, it might even be, I don't know if it's Jackson's of Piccadilly like this one or if it's one of the other biggies, claim to have the original recipe. But essentially, it's a black tea that's flavored with bergamot, which is a herb. And its bergamot oils are put into the tea, and that's what gives Twinings and all the other brands of Earl Grey that distinct aroma and the distinct taste. You'll find a lot of other teas and blends are starting to put bergamot in as well because it's so popular. Personally, I'm not into that. I have my own stock of private tea that I get brought over by relatives from Malaysia. It's a bow tea from the Cameron Highlands, and those tea leaves originated, or the tea plants, in India. If you have a look at some of the teas I have down in front, you have some classic black tea, which is actually my bow tea from Malaysia, but they're Indian plants. And it's a fairly fine tea. Be careful, some of the cheaper teas that you get from India, especially the imports, can be almost like a dust. Tea dust is really the leftover, the bits and end bits of the tea. So if it's like a powder, that's a fairly cheap tea. What you want is some distinct tea leaf shape in there. There can be broken, as you can see with these, they're broken into small pieces. Things such as orange pekoe. Orange pekoe is not a tea variety. Orange pekoe is a grade or size of leaf that originated in Sri Lanka or Ceylon. So when you see orange pekoe, in the old days that was an indicator for the shippers that had the tea clippers going off to Britain on the size and cut, which hence also equaled the quality of the tea. Other things to look for in tea is you'll find that teas can be picked when they're very young, sort of first or second flush, the new buds that come on a leaf. This tea here that I have, which is an organic tea range here from Touch Organic, these ones here, the sweet green tea, essentially those are a first flush. They're an early picking, so there's a lot more sweet flavor in them. Here's another tea, an organic jasmine. Now, because it's graded organic, the actual jasmine leaves, or flowers, should I say, are not added to this tea. They're infused separately because they can't certify the jasmine is organic. So they're actually infusing the tea, but the tea itself is organic. Here's another one that's a rare Chinese tea. This is actually organic white tea, which again is a slightly fermented tea, a lightly fermented green tea that has a very delicate flavor. Your traditional teas that you have down here, here's an oolong tea. Oolong, the majority of oolong comes from the island of Taiwan, and that's a fermented tea. And if you notice, it's also curled and rolled slightly, and they're fairly large leaves, which will expand. That'll give you a nice amber, smoky tea that you find in some Chinese restaurants. Another one you find in Chinese restaurants is jasmine tea, which is a green tea which has had the jasmine leaves added to it, like I mentioned earlier, the organic version. My black tea here, more traditional, and there's so many different versions from Darjeeling to the Assams, and within those areas there's different grades and qualities of tea. And then over here is a Japanese green tea, which I love to open up to people's taste buds, which is called Genmaicha. And it's actually got roasted rice in it. And you can see little pieces of popcorn. And that's actually the rice that's popped. Japanese teas are quite different from the Chinese. And they tend to be a little more on the bitter side, some of them, and larger leaf. But this tea is a very nutty aroma. You'll love to try Genmaicha. You can get it in most of the stores. And I've included something that isn't a tea, but is very popular now, because there's all sorts of tisanes or infusions of herbs that make teas, and you'll see lots of them on the shelves, and they're very popular, you know, the lemon teas, etc., mints. But this is actually Royboss, which is from South Africa. So that's just an idea of some of the different types of teas that you can enjoy. For Shaw TV, I'm Spicy Steve on the Tea Trail down at Mara Kitchens in Caristell.
For recipes and information on cooking classes, visit spicysteve.com.